Hi everyone, some of you may know me, Timm from the International Screenwriters Association's podcast called Curious About Screenwriting. I interview special guests as well as host a solo podcast called The Craft on there. I'm taking a little bit of a break from giving you writing advice and instead sharing with you my debut novel. So I'm doing something kind of special here and a little different than my usual podcasts. But my paranormal fantasy novel, The WishKeeper, is releasing to all nationwide bookstores on June 10th, 2016. And as a way to celebrate and give you readers a little something fun, and you commuters out there who don't have time to sit down and read a book every day, I'm releasing it for free as a weekly serial podcast. Here's how the serial will work. We've brought on the wonderfully talented Kasch to present to you a couple chapters at a time. I'll also chime in now and then and read the male roles in the story, so it'll be a little like an old radio show in some ways. Molly is a veteran actor and happens to work with me at the International Screenwriters Association, so she's a co-worker, and she was gracious enough to jump on board and tackle this big project with me. A new episode will be released every week, and Molly and I will read 1 or 2 chapters at a time. But since this is my debut novel, and since I'm regularly giving you writing advice and interviews, etc. through the ISA, and since I adapted this book from a screenplay, which is kind of backwards, as I'm sure you know, most books are adapted into a screenplay, not the other way around. And because some of you may be writers out there, I'll record separate intros and share little bits of information about the forthcoming chapter as far as the writing process was concerned. Consider it kind of an author notes or behind the scenes sort of thing. Nothing too extensive or time consuming because I want this to be about telling a story and giving you my book for free. So it took me over 8 years to develop the story, and really it shouldn't have, but, life gets in the way. But all of those 8 years were focused on writing around 15 drafts or so of the screenplay version. I've honestly lost count of the exact amount of drafts since I reworked the story so many times over that time period, but it's quite a bit different than the first iteration of the idea. Originally, my sister Carrie and I wanted to write a script based on the old PC video game series called King's Quest. I don't know if you people in your 30s and 40s out there remember King's Quest, but I loved that game when I was a kid. But we planned on writing a script based on the first 2 games, and when we finally did, which ended up being not too bad, we couldn't secure the rights, obviously, since A, we were nobodies, and B, we were broke. You put those 2 things together and plop us down in the middle of Hollywood, it's kind of a tough hurdle to overcome. So we scrapped the King's Quest idea and rewrote the story to be an original one. The first 2 or 3 drafts of what was originally titled Paragonia were okay, but compared to what the story is now, it's remarkably different. It didn't have anything to do with fairies. The only character that remains in this current version of the book, compared to the original script, is Grayson. He's one of the human characters entrenched in this big fantasy adventure, but as later drafts came about, a little fairy with a chipped wing popped into the story. Her name was Shay, and as we developed her and the overall story around her, her voice kept becoming stronger and stronger until eventually she just kind of dominated everything. It sums up Shay's character quite well, actually. She's the kind of girl who demands attention. You know these types, right? They're just the right amount of annoying without being hated. They have a determination that makes them slightly blind to any other so-called way. They do what they believe is right, and they won't let anyone stand in their way. After playing with Shay a little, I realized that I wanted to tell that story, her story, and when I decided to completely shred Shay's wings, she suddenly became a disabled teenager because she was the only fairy that couldn't fly. She was bullied, and very basically her story simply became more interesting. When I eventually created the rest of the world of wishing and a fairy's role in the wishing process, everything just kind of fell into place. So what is the WishKeeper? Like I said, it's the story of a disabled teenager who wants desperately to prove that she's just as good as anyone else, but she's a fairy, and she doesn't want to just be any old fairy. She wants to be a WishKeeper fairy. A WishKeeper is assigned to us when we're born, each of us humans, and that fairy tends to all of the wishes we make in a lifetime. So Shay has never been able to join the WishKeeper force, or the Fairy Intelligence Agency if you want to get official, because she can't fly. Her wings are shredded. She's been bullied her whole life. She's sat on the sidelines watching other fairies become what she knows she too can become. But when a true love wish is made, she's determined to come to our world and find the wish and grant it. And this is the story of how she does. While I'm aiming the book towards ages 10 and up, it's definitely a story adults will enjoy, I think. I originally self-published the book, but when it won the young adult category of the Los Angeles Book Festival in 2015, a fiction press called Odd Int Media picked it up and signed me to a 3-book deal. So yes, there will be 2 more books in this series coming out eventually, and that kind of gives me anxiety to think about, but it's also exciting. But anyway, I've had a lot of adults in their 30s and 40s and up enjoy this just as much as the kids have, so hopefully you enjoy this as well. well. As you listen to more episodes and as we near the June 10th official release date, I'll be sharing how you can win free copies of the book along with other prizes and goodies. So keep listening and stay tuned. This is going to be fun. I'm excited. So kick back, relax, grab some tea, and let me tell you a story.
The WishKeeper, Book 1 of the Paragonia Chronicles, written by Maximilian Timm, read and performed by Molly Kasch. Episode 1, Prologue, and Chapters 1 and 2. Prologue. Even WishKeepers make clerical errors. An overlooked mistake, even of the simplest kind, can grow into a major problem. And when it was discovered that 2 children hadn't yet been assigned WishKeepers, heads rolled. Figuratively speaking, of course. Grayson Brady and Miranda Anderson were born in the same room of the same hospital, one day apart. Miranda was the one who arrived early. Miranda was always the one to arrive early, being the much more eager and adventurous of the two. They grew up in quaint neighboring ranch homes on a small cul-de-sac at the northern tip of a town named Abdera. A throwback little town, Abdera had a main street paved with bricks that unevenly rushed past an old 5-and-dime store that had been renovated into an antique shop. The town was a tourist attraction, simply for its purposefully kept historical feel. A town that never aged, only its inhabitants did. For a kid, it was a perfect place to grow up. And by the time Miranda turned 9 years old, she had scouted every inch of the woods at the end of her little cul-de-sac. Miranda was always searching for something. There was always a door that needed opening, an empty hallway that called her name, or an expansive forest that begged for her exploration. Grayson was an introvert that would rather consider his own thoughts and musings than consider someone else's. Not that he ignored his parents' love or guidance, he simply listened and took it all in. His father would secretly wish that Grayson would talk back or pout or throw some form of a tantrum just to see a spark of life within his son. As his parents would ready themselves for bed, Grayson would overhear them chatting, worried about their son and wishing he would show the same adventurous spirit as the other kids his age. While he didn't feel there was anything wrong with him, Grayson knew his life was merely on hold, and it was going to be worth the wait. When 2 WishKeepers were finally assigned to the children, the 2 fairies discovered quite quickly that they had a mountain of work ahead of them. As Baron and Eleanor transferred to the other side for their first wish-wrangling session, they didn't need to search very hard to find their wishmakers. They flew along the edge of the cul-de-sac and found Miranda and Grayson sitting alone on their respective front porches, thinking, dreaming, and wishing. 9 years' worth of their wishes crowded the end of the quiet neighborhood. The bug-eyed, brightly lit wishes smiled and giggled when they finally saw their wishkeepers speeding toward them. All of their athletic wishes, ladder wishes, purity wishes, and money wishes owned this little corner of the other side, and all Baron and Eleanor could do was smile. In the first 9 years of their lives, Miranda and Grayson never had a wish granted. Their wishing lives, however, were about to begin. Chapter 1, Goggled. 10 years ago. "Wings tucked, Private," Shay's mother ordered with a charged smile. The frozen sap of the evergreen clung to Shay's bare feet as if the icy tree were trying to keep her in one place. It was Wishing Eve in the Maker's world, the other side as the Wishkeepers called it, a night when all Wishkeepers would leave their secret world of Paragonia and cross through the gates to tend to their wishmakers in celebration of opportunity. The opportunity to collect millions of wishes and sustain the harmony between their world and the Maker's. It was the most important night of the year, but for Shay, it was a night that would define her. It was the night a true love wish was destroyed. It was the night her wings were ripped from her delicate shoulders. It was the night her mother died. And the sap of the evergreen tugged at her toes, begging her not to move. She should have listened. She played along with her mother's orders as Eleanor stood in front of her little fairy daughter, fists at her hips. "Check! Yes, ma'am," Shay replied, standing upright and tucking her wings straight behind her. Goggled?" her mother asked, stern. Shay adjusted oversized aviator goggles around her eyes. "Check! Wishes made? Wishes granted," she said as she stiffened a salute at her forehead. Matching smiles rimmed their lips as the setting sun of the other side silhouetted Eleanor's graceful wings. "I have to go to work," Eleanor said through a deep breath. It was Shay's first time on the other side, and she could sense that her mom regretted not being able to stay with her all night. Shay loved the feeling of the slow, gentle swipe of her mother's fingers as they gently tickled her forehead, moving the thick red mane out of her eyes. Despite never wanting to admit it, there was an immeasurable eagerness within Shay's little body to become her mother. Every ounce was desperately impatient to be just like her. Shay watched her mom buzz her wings and prep for a quick launch. "Hey, Mom?" Shay stopped her. She felt compelled to say something, but the words dangled from her tongue. Eleanor waited for one last peep from her eager daughter. I mean, never mind," Shay said with a bashful smile. "I won't be long," Eleanor returned, noticing the eagerness of adolescence pouring from her daughter's eyes. "You are going to be a wonderful WishKeeper someday. But it's not today, honey. Please, promise me you'll stay here." Little Shay nodded as wishes darted through the park behind Eleanor. The impulse to fly after each and every one of them was overwhelming as Shay watched her mother zoom out of the tree and into the sea of colorful wishes. Purple, blue, pink, and green, the wishes danced and darted through the park. Their playfulness was intoxicating. The evergreen did its best to keep her little feet stuck to its branch, but as much as she wanted to be a good fairy and follow her mother's orders, Shay couldn't deny her innate impulse to explore. Present day. It was 10 years ago, but the edges of her nightmares had only sharpened. There are signposts to every memory, checkpoints that Shay forced herself to remember so that the in-betweens of that particular night were never forgotten. The little Goggles game. The bleeding red of her father's tunic as he said goodbye to his wife just before she destroyed the true love wish. How the wind that swirled around her was black and wet, and the face that stretched out of it, their wishing king's skull-gray face. How easily her beloved wings were torn from her back as the bright red explosion of the wish consumed her. Bouncing between these signposts allowed her to fill in the gaps of her memory and strengthen her anger, resentment, and frustration as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling and fighting sleep. And though her thoughtful run from checkpoint to checkpoint always started with the relentless tug from the sap of the evergreen, the fire that fueled it all was not an image, but an incessant reminder. Had Shay known it was to be the last time she would have a conversation with her mom, she might have said it. She might have pushed through her little barrier in her heart that kept her safe from expressing anything remotely vulnerable. She might have found the urge to hold back the 3 words that, for years to come, she would grow accustomed to hating. Instead, every night she would wonder if saying those 3 words would have made a difference. It was impossible for Shay to release such imagery from her mind. It was impossible for her to forgive her parents for destroying a true love wish. And it was impossible to forget that she never told her mom that she loved her. Chapter 2. Forget-Me-Nots. You are going to be a wonderful WishKeeper someday, but it's not today, honey. Please. Shay's frustrated response would always echo as she woke. If not today, then when? It had been 10 years, and someday had yet to come. The pain from her cramped, stiff wings in the morning would brush the dusty echo away, and reality would return. Her broken wings would always stiffen up at night, and she got used to waking with an aching back. On this particular morning, there was a different kind of pain in her back. She needed to pull double duty, work at the wish nursery in the morning, and manage a gate as a gatekeeper in the evening. She had recently been promoted to gatekeeper and was relieved to no longer need to serve the nursery on a full-time basis. It was, however, the final day of practice runs before the keeper performance trials for all new recruits, and her father needed a helping hand in the nursery. It would be another day within another year that she would have to watch other fairies attempt to become wishkeepers. Since the accident, as her father called it, she and her dad had needed a new cottage to live in. Their previous home was the general's quarters, a relative mansion compared to the rest of the fairy cottages in the forest. Sprawling out over the top of a high arcing oak tree, the general's quarters were impossible to reach for any fairy that couldn't fly. Being the father of the only fairy that couldn't, Baron had made the decision that a cottage at the base of the oak would be the safest place for his handicapped daughter. Handicapped daughter. Shay refused to admit such a thing, but the hidden glances and furrowed brows of her fellow fairies made it difficult to forget her mangled wings. Shay tried to make the most of her new grounded home, and for months had begged her father to build the turret she now called her bedroom. Her large picture window was at the top of the turret and looked out into the open green valley. It was a wonderful view in most respects, but Shay purposely built a long overhang at the top of the window to shield her view of the fairies flying through the trees above her. Walking to her window, Shay stopped, stretched, and yawned. She had loud red hair streaked with bright blonde highlights, and her knee-high striped socks and green plaid skirt were stained with dirt and dried mud. She removed her tank top, pulling it up and over her head, and cringed as it slightly tugged on one of her broken wings. All that was left of her wings were dark, skeletal remains, mere remnants of the once silky extremities she had loved as a child. She stood at the window, topless and secretly exposed to the world, and took a deep breath. Her toned arms fell to her side. They were painted with 2 large tattoos that dashed down the sides of her biceps. The tattoos were of stripped, broken wings, something she was proud to show off, especially since her dad hated them. She strapped a worn, soft leather, high-collared, sleeveless vest around her. Brass buckles were covered by a thick silver zipper, which she pulled up to her chin. Standing up straight, lean and athletic, she was quite a bit taller now, 10 years older and on the verge of adulthood, some might say. She looked out at the peaceful valley through her wide picture window. Her nose ring glimmered and reflected the morning sunlight as models of flying machines above her lightly swayed in the morning breeze. Like most days, this was just one she wanted to be over with. But a sinking feeling bottomed out her stomach, and she wondered if tomorrow would be any different. A knock at the door startled her from her little meditation. She groaned, knowing who it was.
"Shay, you up?"
Her dad called out from the other side of the door. "Yes, my doting father. Can't wait to embrace this lovely day." There was no better way to have her morning ruined than to receive a check-in call from her father, and it happened every morning. She never fell asleep long enough for her to actually sleep in. Could he just once not worry about her and start his day without slapping that dumb door?
"Well, before you go, stop down in the kitchen."
She listened to his footsteps creak the floorboards of the nearby staircase. Stop by the kitchen? Since when did her dad want to have breakfast with her? Snatching her wand from under a pile of dirty socks, she stopped at a mirror to make sure she looked just as awful as she felt. She pulled her thick hair back into a puffy, frizzed ponytail and took another deep breath. Unable to look too long into the mirror, she made sure not to make eye contact with herself. Despite all of her attempts to color her hair, cover her body with ink or jewelry, she was the spitting image of her mom, and moments at the mirror never lasted very long. Aviator goggles dangled from the corner of the mirror. She grabbed them absent-mindedly and placed them around her neck. She smelled something surprisingly good wafting from the kitchen as she approached, and when finally creeping in, she couldn't help but snicker at the sight of her father wearing an apron and cooking breakfast over the stove. "What in the world are you doing, Dad?"
"Just because I'm a General Shay doesn't mean I can't cook a damn fine breakfast for my daughter."
Her snickering stopped. An audible sigh rippled up from her chest as she realized her dad was most likely up to something. "What do you want?"
"What do I want? I haven't seen or spoken with my daughter in almost a week. We both have a busy day ahead of us, so I thought..."
Shay knew that her dad saw her expression change. Otherwise, he would have continued mumbling about needing to spend time with the daughter he barely knew.
"Now, Shay, just listen for a second."
Rushing through the kitchen, Shay knocked 2 glasses of cherry juice from the table, albeit an accident, though it had a nice effect, and stormed to the back door.
"Shay, wait, please."
She whipped around enraged. "I told you I was done with this. I told you I didn't want to, and here you are," Shay yelled, anger boiling.
"You owe it to her to celebrate."
Barron pleaded.
"To remember her."
"I remember, and I don't owe her anything." She wanted to scream it, but the unwanted and sudden emotion gripped her throat. "And if there's anyone who owes something, it's her." She turned and stormed out of the cottage, broken wings and all. As she pushed through the green, soft grass of the valley, she didn't care if her father was upset. She didn't care if he didn't have anyone to celebrate with. As far as Shay was concerned, there wasn't anything to celebrate. Her mother was dead, and that was that. Bounding through the rising morning sunshine, she was more upset that she couldn't shake the sadness of having forgotten her mother's birthday.
Thanks for listening to the WishKeeper Serial Podcast. Stay tuned for more, as there is lots more to come. I'll be releasing an episode every week as we move toward the June 10th release date. If you'd like to follow me on social media, you can find the WishKeeper on Facebook and Instagram just by searching for the WishKeeper. Or you can find me personally, Max Timm, on Twitter at iMaxTimm, and on Facebook as Maximilian Timm. I'm also on Instagram as Instamax9. For those of you who find themselves wanting more from Shay and her world, you can go to wishkeeperbook.com. You'll find details on the wishing process there, along with background information on multiple characters, additional artwork, and if you're curious, further information about yours truly. Thanks for listening, everyone, and as the keepers say, it's not about making wishes, it's about fulfilling them. Keep wishing, keep working hard, and until next time.